All right, and welcome back, everyone. This is your friend Kevin from Kennel.net. Today, I'm going over how I clean an NES 004. You know it better as a controller. You're not going to need everything that I have before me. Most likely, you'll do this in front of a sink instead of on a table, so you won't need a clean water basin. You will need some kind of drying area. You're going to need a couple brushes. This is medium density nylon. This is just a soft paintbrush. And in this one, this is my favorite. It's like a mid to light stiffness, good density. I'll show you how I use that one in just a second. You may or may not need some tweezers. You will need a small Phillips head screwdriver. The head on this one's already fallen apart. A rubber band or some kind of twist tie. A couple cotton swabs. Isopropyl alcohol. Normally I use 99. So I will again. An all-purpose cleaner. I'm using Meguiar's all-purpose cleaner. I don't know if you can buy that at your normal auto parts store. Any all-purpose cleaner is going to work just fine. They're all pretty much the same, just different concentrations. So with that in mind, I have my Meguiar's at a 10-to-1. You're going to want to flip that bottle over when you buy it and see what it says for plastics and rubbers. Usually there's going to be some sort of dilution. So keep that in mind. You don't want to go full strength. You don't need to. You're just going to cause yourself to have to rinse off a lot more. So first thing we're going to do, we'll take our disgusting cable here, and it's hard to see, but this cable is covered in schmutz. I don't know how else to describe it. So I'm going to go ahead and just wrap this up a little bit, and that's fine for now. We're not storing it. In fact, something I do want to talk about, I see a lot of people cranking them around like that, like you're still 8 years old. Stop doing that. Store your cables. Make them, 3 to 4 inch, 5 inch loops and just keep going around. Your cables will last significantly longer. So the next thing we want to do, we're going to flip it over. Here are our 6 screw holes. I want to line up my screw head and give it some good pressure. So each one of these, I'm going to be pressing down as I turn to make sure I'm not skipping over and cutting off that screw head. So I'll go ahead and do all 6 of these. All right, so this one you saw came out magnetized. Going to go ahead and turn it over, give it a tap. Now they're not falling out. So sometimes when it feels like you're all the way out, you're not. Other times you are, but they just don't want to come out. Hopefully your magnetized screwdriver works well, but if not, I'll show you. That's why we have our tweezers here. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. There we go. That one fell. That one's still stuck. So we have our 6 screws in front of us here. I thought I lost one. Going to go ahead and set those out of the way so we don't lose them. Now our case just comes right apart. Here's our back part. We'll set that off to the side. Our motherboard, it's important to pay close attention here. So you can see the way the cable is routed. Coming in from the top, down, under, around. Now after 30 years, 35 years, this cable is going to be pretty stiff, so you don't have to worry about maintaining its shape or the integrity thereof. You can kind of just finagle this out. Now that's loose. Now we want to be careful with our chipboard here. Sometimes they fall right out, sometimes they're set in. Get our wires out of the way. Maybe use our tweezers a little bit. There we go. So, took a little extra on this one. We have our motherboard out now. Backside looks pretty good, as they usually do. Front side, also not bad. If you watch the Genesis controller, you notice that was really bad. First thing, we're going to set the buttons in the front part of the shell out of our way. Since the motherboard is easy to clean, we're going to go ahead and give that a dust off. Make sure there's no loose debris on there. Now we'll set that off to the side. We'll hit that with the isopropyl in just a moment. Back to our shell halves. Turn that over and they will all fall out. Now, you don't need to do this, but I like to just keep them out of the way. We're just going to toss those into water. That's off to the side. I had to zoom in a little bit. So that's going to soak those up, help loosen up any dirt and debris before we hit them with the brush. Speaking of the brush and recalling our all-purpose cleaner from earlier, we're going to go ahead and spray that out, both sides. Now you can let that dwell for a little while. You don't really need to with with this all-purpose cleaner because we're going to be agitating. Now, first thing I'd like to point out, and I wish I had done this before I just sprayed the water, but you can see where the raised letters, and this is the same on Sega controllers, the same on, I can't remember, no, PlayStation and Xbox, I believe, just had a sticker. I'm not looking at one right now. But a lot of dirt sticks in all these areas, as well as the holes. The backside, not too much, but or the inside as it is. So we're going to hit that first, since we don't have much to worry about here. Wet up our brush a little bit, make our suds nice. Okay, so now onto the business end of things. Okay, so not bad for our first pass. It's hard to see. I don't have my other camera. I just had to switch out. My other camera broke earlier today. So the reason why we have different size brushes now, we want to be able to press something and get down into these screw holes if there's dirt. There's not always, but it's worth looking, kind of go at your different angles and see where there is anything. And we'll worry about that stain in just a minute. That's a rub mark, as is that down there. But we already can see the difference that we've made. So what I'm going to do, I have a little basin of water down by my foot. We're going to drop that in there. Now for our front side, we've already sprayed it. So just like before, we're going to go ahead and agitate. In doing so, you want to make sure you pay attention to the lip that goes all the way around. Make sure there's no dirt getting stuck in there or any staining that you don't want to be visible later on, which is basically everything that's not Nintendo gray. Wet up our brush a little bit. Another place dirt likes to hide, right up in this little notch. So that's looking pretty good. We're going to go ahead and put that in our water now. Next thing we're going to do is take care of our buttons. So we'll pull those back out of our Pyrex. Now with the buttons, I usually just use the smaller brush. So we're going to wet that up a little bit with some all-purpose cleaner. We'll start with the contact pads. We're not going to be able to get all the rubber transfer marks off, and that's fine. Basically what we're doing is ridding the dirt from the surface, and you might be able to tell now the suds are a different color than they were when I was cleaning the inside of the back part of the controller, for example. That was pretty clean. So the suds also stayed bright white. Now we have some grime. We'll make sure our contacts are nice and clean when that goes right back into the water. 9 times out of 10, if you have a squeaky controller, it's because your buttons have a bunch of dust inside of them. That dust creates friction against the other parts of plastic. And as small as a particle of dust is, that's just enough to create that noise as it grinds back and forth. If you were to look at it through a microscope, it looks like big boulders scratching against plastic. So that's where your noises are coming from. Now that's good. Start and select. Keep in mind with start and select, these buttons get pressed a lot. So we're just going to give these a nice brush off. Get all those dead skin cells out of there. Same with the back side, though not as many dead skin cells on the back side, just regular dirt. And hit those tops. Sometimes I forget. Now our A and B button, usually these are pretty easy to clean. These don't even have anything on them as filthy as the rest of the controller was. But nonetheless, I'm going to give it a brush off, hitting the sides as well, even though they're not visible. So that one's done. Now we'll come back to the other one. And that one's done. So we're going to put that in the thing. Now I've dried my hands nice and good. We're getting ready to hit our motherboard with some 99% isopropyl alcohol. So what I like to do, just pour some into the cap. Get our cotton swab out. With our cotton swab nice and moist, now we're just going to go over, first we're going to start with our contact points. I tend to go over the whole thing, not really necessary, but makes me feel good. As long as I'm hitting these contact points first, that's my main concern. Make sure they're all nice and clean. And I'm going to flip over this Q-tip in just a moment. Cotton swab, I'm sorry, not sponsored. And you can see we are getting a decent amount of dirt, and that rubber is deteriorated a bit. And we just go through the whole thing like this, a little bit at a time, angling it into different parts of light to see if there is any dirt. This one, despite the outside being so bad, the inside's really not that bad. If you go back and watch the video I posted about the Genesis controller, the interior of that Genesis controller was filthy. This isn't too bad. Now I'm going to flip over to the dry and clean side. Just kind of go back and forth one more time. Okay, so that's definitely way more than was necessary. It is good and clean, and since we're using 99%, it's already pretty close to dry. But I'm going to take another dry and clean Q-tip just to go over all the rest, make sure there's nothing really stuck to it. Looking pretty good. Now, the next thing we want to do is dry off everything. Our pieces that were down in the clean water basin, we're going to dry those off. Now, when I'm doing a lot of these, I usually just leave them on the counter. There's no sense in drying each one piece by piece. But there is always, it's worth going around. I like to take my thumbnail, push it through the paper towel and go around this edge. I don't know if I can pick up any. But up here, you can kind of see there is still some dirt that the brush didn't get. And it's because it's such a small area there. It would be tough to get the brush to really do anything. So that's good. Now I'm going to kind of encompass it like this. And what I am going to do, just for the sake of full disclosure, once I wipe this off and get most of the moisture out, I'm still going to let it sit for about an hour. That way I don't have any trapped water inside my controllers. It's always worth noting this area and this area, moisture is going to hang in there, as same up here. If you have compressed air, whether it's a can or an actual compressor, could be worth getting that out. If you're of the Nintendo generation, you know as well as I do, just blowing it, it's good enough. So that's good. We're going to set that off to the side as we hit the front edge, the front shell. This one definitely where the compressed air comes into play and would be much more of a benefit to you, as all these areas up here make it difficult to really reach in there. Sometimes when they're really bad, you do need to go over multiple times. Dirt likes to hide up in those lips and around the vinyl sticker here. It'll slide down in there. The brush I'm using is pretty good for that, so I don't need to worry there. Looks like I have a little bit more up here. We're going to hit that. We're going to spot clean that top piece. I can't quite tell if it's a burn mark or if it's actual dirt. Perhaps a combination. And then lastly, our cable port. Again. Now looking at this closely, I might not have done a good job with the brush. I was probably rushing. So just put a little APC on my towel here. And let's see if we can get rid of that. No. So that is an actual burn mark. And that happens. I mean, we're talking 35 years old right here. So not really a big deal. It's not a Grand Concours restoration. Ooh, so here's a good, the last couple I didn't have to worry about this. So inside of the buttonholes, there's a significant amount of dirt in there. First course of action, I'm going to take my dampened towel, kind of jam that in until I can't anymore, and then just twist it around. We'll see what that results. Almost all of it. So give it another try. It looks like it's right around the 7 o'clock position. Put a little extra pressure over there. That's good. And we're back. Everything's nice and dry now. As promised, we're going to go ahead and see what we can do about that little rub mark. It's not catching with my finger, so it's not really a real scratch. I mean, there's a little bit of catch. But usually a white eraser is just enough friction to get those kinds of things gone. I don't like using much more than this. I know you can use different types of polishes, maybe some sandpaper, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to make things worse. So I go with the eraser. If the eraser doesn't work, then I just discount it. Okay, so there's our back half. Here's our front half. Let's get our buttons out. Of course, I'm laughing at myself right now. I realized just a moment ago I said everything was clean and dry, not realizing the buttons were still right in front of me soaking. So we're going to pat these dry, make sure they're all good, and we'll leave them to sit for a little while. D-pad, it's always worth noting, water will set up in there, so you're going to want to blow into those slots and make sure there's no moisture hanging out. Same as with the D-pad, since it's hard plastic, there will be water that sits up in there, so blast those with some air and you'll be okay. Now we're ready to go. We can start with our A and B buttons. They drop right in here. The tabs line up. There's obviously no up or down, right or wrong way. Start and select. You'll notice there's a little hole here. That hole's going to line up with the post right here. Drops right in. D-pad, same thing. No right or wrong way. So we're going to drop that in. There is a right or wrong way with the D-pad contact. So first we're going to look at that post up there around the 10 o'clock, and then another one down here was at 4 or 5 o'clock. Then our bumpers for the A and B, same thing. There's a post lower left, post upper right. With all these, you just want to make sure the black nubs are pointing back toward you. That's how we're going to make the contact with the motherboard. So we're going to put the motherboard back in. We're going to clean our wire, and then we're all done. Now our screw holes are all going to align. 5 of our screw holes line up with the motherboard, so we can tell right off the bat, good, we're good to go. I don't feel anything bouncing around, so everything is properly seated. Okay, so putting back in our cable, just want to reroute just like before. Around, under, up. And then make sure that's good and seated against the back part of the plastic there as we put our back piece on, making sure that the Nintendo label is pointing up. No other way to do it because the cable's not going to come through. As we look around, make sure that everything around the edges, we have a proper seating. Now this one, man, there's more burn marks over there. This is in rough shape. Nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and put our screws back in, so we'll just drop each one of these in. And just as when we were pulling them out, we want to go slow and keep a lot of downward pressure so that we don't ruin the heads of these screws. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll show you what it looks like fast. So all 6 are set now, and I didn't go crazy. I didn't torque those down to 1,000,000 pounds. Basically, as you get to the bottom, you'll feel it kind of tighten. That's where you want to stop. You don't need to go, balls to the wall with it. So our controller is basically good now. Better, at least. It's not perfect condition. So let's get our rubber band off of our cable. I've gone ahead and sprayed some all-purpose cleaner. So now what we're going to do, keeping a grip on the actual wire itself, we're going to just go the whole length of the wire in both directions at least once, and I'll show you why in just a moment after I speed through this. So that's just after one pass. That's disgusting. That was on your cable there. Probably not as much. This was a basement storage. But still, you're going to find a lot of that at garage sales these days. So there's our second pass. We're going to keep going. Third pass. This last pass, we're just doing a dry run just to get off the rest of the all-purpose cleaner. Make sure we don't have any more suds. And even on the drying pass, there was still a little bit of dirt there. You know what? I'd be happier with one more pass. Good. This is also a good time as we're running through the cable. It's a quick way to figure out if there's any cuts or kinks in the actual cable. There's a little paint there. So that just flakes right off. No big deal. Now we also want to inspect the plug side. You'll see this one does have a lot of dust down there. I've never seen a necessity to use any contact cleaner on the actual connection area. But if your controller's not working and you just cleaned it and made sure the inside's all good, that will be your next and really only other course of action there. So we'll go ahead and sud that up nice and good. Come around making sure that we don't get anything in there. It's not a big deal if we do. We can still just dry it out. Dry brush. Hit that end up a little bit. Knock off all the lint. All right, we're good there. Our last course of action, this is actually optional, but recommended, especially if you're selling your controllers. You want to make it as nice as you can for the person. So I use Tire Shine. This is from Larry at Ammo NYC. He's got a great YouTube channel. He's a detailer. His wife's a chemist, and they came up with a whole bunch of really great high-end products. Most of it's way too expensive for just your regular driveway person. I don't think you can find this in a store anywhere, but you can find other Tire Shine. What I would recommend is go with a matte. You don't want a high gloss. You want to go with matte, and that's why I use this. Plus, it smells beautiful. So what we're going to do is we're going to moisturize our cable now. So I put a unreasonable dab on there. That's way more than I needed. And then just like when we're cleaning, we're going to take it and just pull it through here to rehydrate that rubber. And it's going to give it a really nice feel. And it's going to, I mean, there's no way for me to prove that it's going to give it extra life, but that's just the nature of plastics and rubber. As long as you keep them well conditioned, they will last longer. So that's on there. Then we'll take our dry side and just kind of wipe it. Now, if this cable was really dry and nasty after cleaning it still, then I would let this stuff sit on there so it penetrates. But after cleaning it, this cable is actually not too bad. The Genesis one was a different story. I had to let that sit for quite a while. So that's good. Now, before we put it away and get it ready to list, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. 4-inch loops about the size of my hand. Let the cable naturally turn on itself so we're not putting any undue stress on the rubber or on the cabling inside. Nice. Give that a good squeeze while I reach for the rubber band. And there we have it. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Wouldn't say it's brand new condition, but you know what? It's way better than it was. Buttons, nice. They feel good. That D-pad feels strong. We're all set. So that's going to do it for our NES controller, how to clean it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, good jokes or bad jokes, leave those down in the comment section below. I'll respond to you as quickly as I can. And I appreciate you watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Keln.net, a better way to buy games and stuff.